Hello, hello. My name is Liku Amadi, founder and attorney of Anasa Law Firm, where I work with consultants and expert service providers to help them establish a solid legal foundation for their business. And that is mainly through the most important document, which is your client contract. On today's live video, we're going to be talking about what protection really means, what legal protection really means for consultants, service providers, coaches, and experts like yourself. Because when I work with most of my clients, they have one idea of what it means to be legally protected as they grow their business. But when I'm done working with them at the end of our engagement, they have a completely different idea. And I want you guys to have this idea at the outset. So while you're making your business plans, having your team meetings, deciding how you're going to scale in the next 6 to 12 months, you have all of this in mind to consider. So let's get into it. Gotta clear my throat there. Um, so what most service providers want is to just make sure they're protected, right? And when we think about protection, it's usually about lawsuits. I don't want to get sued. I don't want to get into legal trouble, right? Whether that's a lawsuit or a lawyer coming to you and saying, hey, you worked with this client in the past and now here are some issues, right? Nobody wants that legal trouble. It's expensive. It's scary. It causes a disruption to the rest of your business operations, right? It can be a lot to deal with no matter how well you're doing in business, especially if you don't have a full-fledged legal department built out to just take care of that for you. It's something that can really disrupt your flow and the course of you doing business. So that is the one thing that people want to avoid. Another thing that service providers want to avoid is having to chase after people for money that they're owed, right? Or leaving money on the table. That's a huge frustration. So when clients come to me, they're saying, hey, I had this situation in the past where I had to chase after the client ghosted, the client delayed their payment, right? There's just some issue going on with payment. And rightfully so, everyone wants to make sure that they're protected so that when they do the hard work that they were hired for, when they do the thing that people invested in them for, they get paid for it, right? I mean, that's the whole point of business. You help someone, you get paid for it, the cycle continues. And so that's a huge frustration when people don't get paid. It's not necessarily a lawsuit, but it is a risk for a business because that too can disrupt flow, operations, and really just how you do business. And then, of course, you don't want people stealing your things, right? When we think about legal protection, we're also thinking about our intellectual property, and particularly for consultants and coaches and strategists and expert service providers, we're talking about our signature methods, our signature frameworks, things that we've taken the time to really figure out and put together and apply to everything that we do when we help our clients in whatever our expertise is in, right? We don't want people stealing that. We don't want them copying it. We don't want them being inspired by it, if you will, whether that's working with our clients or even doing other related things like live videos, social media content, speaking on podcasts and on stages as a guest speaker, right? We want to make sure all of those things are protected, including our program and framework names, any slogans or sayings that we have. That is a huge consideration or huge points of pain, excuse me, for consultants and expert service providers to think about because essentially that's your moneymaker. That's what people know you for. That's what makes you stand out in the marketplace. So no one wants it copied or watered down because that is a valuable asset to your business. So far, are you picking up what I'm putting down? Let me know in the comments. So that is the legal protection that people usually come in with. I'm concerned about these three main things, and rightfully so, right? But we want to expand our understanding of what it means to be legally protected and what we should be looking out for outside of just these big or specific circumstances, right? What I say is that lawsuits may not happen every day, but they are the result of things that happen every day. So we want to make sure that we are looking at our business, we're looking at our operations, we're looking at our client relationships, employee, contractor relationships, collaborations, and just making sure we have all of our ducks in a row so that we can conduct business without that fear, without having to look over our shoulder thinking, what if? Or am I protected? Or am I going to get in trouble for this? How much of this can I share with my client or my partner or my collaborator without risking it being stolen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? All those questions going on in your head should have some type of answer. You should at the very least have some foundational understanding of what that answer is. So that's what I'm here to give to you, because ultimately the goal is to increase revenue and decrease risk. Increase revenue, decrease risk. And the two work together, which is why we want to be legally protected. So let me give you, I got like 5 things here off the top of my head that I want you to think about when you're thinking, am I legally protected? Is my business protected? Are these other things protected or exposed to risk? So number one is making sure your day-to-day operations are tight. Specifically, when it comes to working with your clients, it's the little things that really trip us up, and they turn into big issues. They turn into lawsuits. They turn into, oh, I'm going to contact my attorney, and those threats and passive aggressive behavior, right? When we have miscommunications because our communication policy isn't tight enough, when we have a misunderstanding about what the client is getting and what they're not getting because your services weren't clear enough, right? When we have a misunderstanding of making sure we abide by any deadlines or the timeline for which work is completed because we haven't tightened up the boundaries around that. And that's all about the day-to-day operations, right? You get to see more of what is not working and how these issues come up as you're working with your clients, right? So if you think about all of your client experiences, or you even go back to that one client experience where you were like, I'm never working with them again, or oh, that's never happening again. It always comes down to something in the contract. It always comes down to either how the services are described, how the boundaries or client policies are laid out, or maybe they're not laid out, which is why you're making things up on the fly, right? It comes down to how your delivery is structured and organized and how all of that is communicated to your clients. So I think that was my husband sneezing. Bless him, because that sounded crazy. But ultimately, it comes down to those day-to-day things, right? It comes down to all of those small interactions, those communications. So you want to make sure that if you're finding some frustration, or if you're finding some type of fault or discrepancy, or just something you don't like, that's something that gets tightened up, because one miscommunication might be frustrating, but if that's something that's consistently happening, that's because your contract hasn't communicated what needs to be happening, and that expectation hasn't been properly laid out for your client, right? Number two is making sure your intellectual property is protected. So again, those signature frameworks and though the names of your programs, those things that should be trademarked, and we'll actually get into that in another video. But your frameworks, your method, the things that people come to you for, you need to make sure that number one, you're able to identify what are those things in my business? What is my intellectual property, right? What are my signature methods? Have I put that together, right? You need to be able to understand, number two, how you can leverage those things. And let me back up a little bit and actually say what you want to do with them in the future, what you can do with them in the future. That's something that you want to understand, so that number three, when you make a plan to actually use them, you're doing it in a way where it's protected and you can do what you've set out for the future, right? So, for example, if we put together a signature framework that you've been using with your clients for the past 5 years, they're killing it, they're getting the results that you've promised. And you want to look to the future and say, how can I scale with this? How can I expand? Maybe you want to create a course, right? That's one thing that a lot of people do in order to teach their method to either their clients or other people who want to be like them or want to do the same thing that they're doing. If you want to put it into a course, if that's your future goal, then you need to come back to the present and say, what do I need to do now to make sure that I can facilitate this course, or people can purchase this course, to make sure that it's protected so that I can make money off of it, right? That means I need to be careful with how I use it with clients. That means I need to be careful when I hire team members and they have access to it too. That means I need to do these 3 things so people don't copy it or try to be inspired by it, is what a lot of people like to say, right? What do you need to do now in order to be able to leverage those frameworks and those assets in the future, right? That is how you want to think about your intellectual property. Because when we say, oh, we don't want somebody to copy them, we don't want them to use it, it's like, yeah, of course. But the other side of that is we don't want them to do that because we want to make sure we can exclusively do it. And we want to make sure that whatever we do with it in the future is only associated with us and that we can make money off of it without other restrictions in place. Do you understand? So that is number two, intellectual property. Number three, you want to have control and flexibility over your client relationships, right? So when we talk about legal protection, we want to make sure that as a service provider, right, not just the expert, not just what you're good at, but as a person who is delivering a service, you want to make sure that not only is your client contract strict and black and white, but there's also these pockets of flexibility that you can exercise for the good of the client relationship, right? For example, if your policy says that you're only entitled to 4 calls and they need to happen within this time frame, and for whatever reason, it could be a family emergency, it could be something that happens on your end, right? The client might come to you like, I need to switch the schedule. You don't want to look at the contract and be frustrated like, ugh, but I only said they were supposed to do 4 within a specific time frame. No, you want to sit back and say, okay, that's no problem. Let's see what we can do about this, right? You want to be able to look at the contract and say, okay, my client tried to abide by it, or they couldn't abide by it because life is life and business is business. However, here's some solutions that I have that won't disrupt our workflow, our timeline, our whatever is going on, and that makes the client happy, right? It's those little pockets of flexibility. If you're able to exercise those, they take the client relationship a long, long way, especially in circumstances where little things can really trip up the trust or the vibe, if you will, that you have going on with your client. So if your client, for example, they come to you with the same scenario. They're like, yeah, I can't make this. And you're like, you know what, that just means that you're going to get 3 calls instead of 4. Sorry, that's the rule. They'll understand because that's what the contract said. However, they'll also be like, you know what I'm saying? They'll be bothered by it. They'll feel like they didn't get the full 4 that they were supposed to, even though it said it in the contract. Ultimately, you want to protect your client relationships by creating as many win-win scenarios as possible when things like that come up. So yes, they do need to abide by the contract, but also as a service provider, you want to be able to have the flexibility to make things work and create win-win situations. So you're not frustrated in one circumstance, and so your client isn't frustrated in another circumstance. Number 4, I have for you is that number 3. And number 4, yes, we're counting correctly. You want to have custom tailored solutions. You want to have custom tailored solutions across the board for your business, but especially when it comes to legal, because if you copy and paste or use a template or just try to, mock what someone else is doing, it's not going to work for you. It actually might expose you to more risk in some circumstances. For example, I worked with a coaching client who had a previous client contract from their coach, right? A former business coach that they had. The business coach said, hey, you know what? I'm teaching you all this stuff. You're going to need a contract here. Just use mine because we do the same type of business, right? Come to find out, of course, there were holes in that contract, not just for that person's business, but also for my client. And in addition to that, because that contract didn't align with my client's operations, it didn't align with the type of service she provided and how she had provided that service, right? There were just all of these misses. A contract is supposed to cover you, it's supposed to protect you, it's supposed to help facilitate a relationship between you and your client, which means that your contract needs to be drafted and curated around the unique way that you do your business, that you facilitate your services, the type of clients that you serve in your industry, and how you do your payment plans and your communication and flexibility and just all of those things, right? Versus when you take something that hasn't been specially made for you, now you're taking your unique business and you're trying to force it into something else, right? That leaves us unprotected because you got things sticking out, you got things that are broken because you tried to force it in. It just doesn't work like that. So you want custom tailored solutions across the board about your client contracts, how to protect your intellectual property, the payment plans that you want to put in place so that there's proper structure and understanding when it comes to your client reading and doing it, right? You want to have solutions that are made to meet your needs so that you can be protected in alignment with those unique needs, right? Number five, you want to have clarity. Clarity is such a powerful thing when it comes to our client relationships and just business in general, right? But when it comes to legal, you want to have clarity about what's going on. Like, yes, I'm doing all of these things in my business, but what does that mean for the future? What happens when I hire employees and contractors? What happens when my clientele goes from 5 new clients a month to 10 new clients a month? What risks are on the table? What do I need to tighten up? What's working? What's not working? What are our boundaries here and why aren't they working, right? You want to be able to be very clear about what's going on in your business, what needs to be fixed, what's working. That way you're aware of all the risk that is on the table, right? When we talk about protection, we want to make sure that there's the least amount of risk as possible. You're in business, like because you're in business every day, you're just opening yourself up to risk. Every day somebody can sue you, every day somebody can be unhappy, and be mindful that you don't have to be in business for 5+ years for that to be likely. You don't have to have, hundreds of clients that you serve to that for that to be likely. This could be your first day as a business. This can be your first client, your third client where you get into some type of trouble. It's because you're always open to risk. And as a business owner, as a service provider, you want to be in a position where you can either minimize that risk or you just know how to handle it. Right? You just know how to handle it. You can come up with a plan that doesn't impact your business operations. It doesn't get you into legal trouble. It doesn't make you leave money on the table, right? Win-win situation. So clarity is another thing that you need to be thinking about. If you don't have clarity in the legal elements of your business operations, where you're protected, where you're not protected, what your goals are and how your protection plan aligns with that goal, then you're lacking clarity in your business. So those are just 5 things, right? I could come up with another 5 about what you should be thinking about when it comes to legal protection. That's other than leaving money on the table, lawsuits, people copying your signature methods and strategies, because legal protection is intertwined into almost every element of your business, especially when you're trying to grow. You have to grow from a foundation where you know you're secure, where you know you can make informed decisions because you're clear on what's going on, where you know what you can share and what you shouldn't share, right? Where your boundaries and limitations are. Because again, legal shows up in every element of your business, from formation to your first client, to your first hire, to your scaling plan and using your signature strategies in different ways, to now finding additional revenue streams like speaking, right? And hosting events. There's always something legal going on there. So at the outset, at the foundation of it all, as you're growing your business, before you start placing those brick by brick by brick, right? Growing your business, you want to make sure that foundation is as solid as possible. So let's expand our understanding or what we think, legal protection means, to include those things. And if you're thinking about your unique way of doing business, your unique strategies, your industry, the clientele that you serve, and you don't feel like you have a custom tailored solution and strategy as you grow your business, then let's talk. You can book a complimentary consultation at anasalawfirm.com, or feel free to send me a DM here on LinkedIn. Okay, that's all I have for y'all today. That was kind of a lot, but it was necessary. So consider these things in your quarterly planning, because Q2 is coming up and 2026 is right around the corner. So make sure these things are on your mind too. All righty. Have a good day.